Welcome to the deep dive. Now, if you've ever scrolled through environmental news, I bet you've seen the term invasive species thrown around a lot.
Oh, definitely. It's everywhere.
But what does it actually mean? Is it an alien species, exotic, maybe a nuisance or noxious?
Right. The terminology is, well, it's a mess. You see all these words used, sometimes interchangeably, sometimes not.
And that confusion, that kind of linguistic swamp, is exactly what we're diving into today.
It really is a source of inefficiency, this lack of clarity. It's what prompted the research we're focusing on today. It's a really influential paper from 2007 by Anthony Ricciardi and Jill Cohen.
And the title?
The title is The Invasiveness of an Introduced Species Does Not Predict Its Impact.
Okay, wow, that title alone is pretty provocative, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
Because it hits right at an assumption that I think many people, maybe especially policymakers, hold quite strongly.
The default belief, yeah, that if a non-native species spreads fast, covers lots of ground, it must be doing a lot of damage, sort of proportionally.
So our mission today is to unpack this paper, look at its findings that suggest the ability of a species to spread quickly. Its, invasiveness in one sense is largely uncorrelated with the ecological harm it might cause.
Exactly. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's start by defining our terms, or rather, the problem with defining them.
Right. The core issue Ricciardi and Cohen flagged is that invasive basically has two different personalities, two separate meanings.
Depending on who's using it.
Precisely. And they argue this inconsistency, this definitional split, really slows down invasion biology as a predictive science. We can't predict well if we don't agree on what we're predicting.
Okay, so let's break down those two definitions. First, the one focused on harm.
That's what we can call the policy definition. Or maybe the harm model. You see this used by, well, pretty much all the big agencies, governmental bodies, international groups.
Like the U.S. government, World Conservation Union.
Yep. U.S. Executive Order 13112, the Canadian government, IUCN, they all use it. And for them, a species is only invasive if its introduction causes, or is likely to cause, significant economic or environmental harm. Harm is the key, especially harm to native biodiversity.
So impact is baked into the definition. No harm, no invasive label, according to policy.
Correct. Impact is the absolute requirement.
Okay, and then what about the ecologists, the scientists studying these things in the field?
Well, many scientists use what we can call the ecological definition, maybe the spread model.
And that focuses on?
Purely on the organism's ability, its potential to spread rapidly and colonize a large area once it's introduced.
So how well it establishes itself, how fast it moves across the landscape?
Exactly. Establishment success, rate of spread. It doesn't necessarily say anything about whether that spread is good or bad for the ecosystem. It's just a measure of, well, biological success in a new place, not about impact.
Got it. So the paper essentially sets up a test, right? It asks, are the species that are really good spreaders, the ecologically invasive ones, also the ones most likely to cause harm, the policy invasive ones?
That's the million-dollar question they tackled. Because it seems logical, doesn't it? A species spreading like wildfire, reaching high numbers. You'd expect it to cause more trouble.
Just by sheer weight of numbers, maybe.
Yeah, potentially. So to test this, they had to figure out how to quantify these two very different things, spread and harm, across a really wide range of organisms.
What kind of organisms did they look at?
Oh, a real mix. Introduced plants, invertebrates, fishes, mammals, amphibians, and reptiles. A broad sweep.
Okay, let's talk methodology. How did they measure invasiveness in that ecological sense, the spread? That seems like the more straightforward part.
Relatively speaking, yes. They use two main metrics. First, for species where we have good records of introduction attempts, like many fish and mammals.
The things people intentionally moved around.
Often, yes. For those, they use the establishment success rate. Basically, what proportion of introduction attempts actually resulted in a self-sustaining population?
So if you tried to introduce a Fritish 10 times and it only took twice, its success rate is 20%.
Exactly. They needed at least 5 documented attempts for a species to be included in this part, just to make the data a bit more robust.
Makes sense. And the second metric, more about speed.
Yep, pure speed. The post-establishment rate of spread. Once a species was established, how quickly did it expand its range? They measured this in kilometers per year.
Kilometers per year. Okay, so that gives you a velocity for everything from a plant seed blowing in the wind to a fish swimming upstream.
Right. It quantifies that colonization success in terms of speed.
Now, the other side of the coin, measuring impact. The harm, that sounds much harder. How do you compare the harm of an invasive mussel filtering water to an invasive plant crowding out natives.
That was absolutely the big challenge. The types of impact, the quality of data available, it's all over the place. So they couldn't just use a simple numerical scale, like dollars lost or something.
So what did they do?
They had to rely on expert documentation, publish studies, reports, and then create a standardized ranking system, an ordinal scale from 0 to 7.
Ordinal meaning the numbers represent ranks, like first, second, third, not precise quantities.
Precisely. It allowed them to categorize the severity of impact in a consistent way, even with messy data. It forces complex situations into clearer bins, which is useful for risk assessment.
Tell me about that scale. What did it take to get the highest rank, a 7? That must have been reserved for the really bad actors.
Oh, absolutely. Rank 7 was for ecological catastrophe. It meant an invader was documented, causing severe declines. They define that as over 80% decline in the populations of at least 2 different native species.
And not just locally.
No, across multiple regions. And critically, they tried to ensure it wasn't just correlation. They looked for evidence that the native decline followed the introduction and increase of the invader, while also considering other possible causes, confounding factors.
So a really high bar for proving widespread, major ecological damage directly linked to the invader.
A very high bar.
Okay. So they have these careful metrics: rate of spread, success rate for establishment, and this 0 to 7 rank for environmental harm. They gather all this data for hundreds of species.
Right.
Then they run the statistics to see if spread predicts harm. And the big reveal, what did they find? This is where it gets really interesting.
The finding was, frankly, pretty stunning from a statistical standpoint. They found no significant correlation between a species' invasiveness measured either by its rate of spread or its establishment success and its ranked environmental impact.
Wait, no correlation, as in none, zip.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
The assumption that faster spreaders cause more harm just didn't hold up in their data set.
So the whole foundation of using spread potential as a proxy for danger potential in management, it's shaky.
According to this study, mathematically, yes. Let's look at the numbers they reported. The ranked impact level was not correlated with the mean rate of spread. The Spearman correlation coefficient was negative 0.04.
Okay, for those of us rusty on stats, +1 is a perfect positive link, -1 is a perfect negative link, 0 is no link at all, so mega 0.04 is.
Basically 0. No meaningful relationship. And the p-value was 0.76, which is very high, indicating the result is not statistically significant. You simply cannot predict the harm rank based on how fast a species spreads.
Wow. So knowing a species zooms across the landscape at 50 kilometers a year tells me almost nothing about whether it's a rank 1 minor nuisance or a rank 7 ecosystem wrecker.
That's what the data showed. And it wasn't just about the speed either. They looked at establishment success rate too, how easily a species gets a foothold.
Same result.
Pretty much. They found a similarly weak relationship between impact rank and establishment success across all the different types of organisms. The correlation was only 0.10, again, not statistically significant. Being good at establishing doesn't mean you'll be devastating once you're there.
This is so counterintuitive. To make it clear, did the paper give specific examples of this disconnect? Species we might know.
Yes, and the examples really drive it home. Think about high invasiveness, low impact species. The common goldfish, Carassius auratus.
Goldfish, like pet store goldfish.
The very same. They're established practically everywhere globally. Huge spread, high establishment success. But ecologically, they generally haven't caused massive, widespread harm ranking high on that scale.
Okay. Any others?
The freshwater jellyfish, Crespidocustus arbi, another species found all over the place, spreads easily through dormant stages. Very successful colonizer, but again, not typically associated with severe ecological damage. They're great at spreading, but not great at causing high-rank harm.
So successful, but relatively benign. And the flip side, the slow spreaders that cause havoc.
Exactly. Low invasiveness, high impact. The classic example they use is the Asiatic clam, Potamocorbula amurensis in San Francisco Bay.
Yes, I've heard about that one.
Its spread beyond the bay has been relatively limited. It's not racing across the continent. But where it is established, devastating impact. It filters the water so efficiently, it caused massive crashes in the phytoplankton and zooplankton populations, the base of the food web.
So a localized disaster versus a widespread, relatively harmless traveler like the goldfish.
Precisely. Imagine you're managing that system. Do you focus on the goldfish spreading everywhere or the clam crippling the local food web even though it's not moving much? The paper forces you to ask that question.
It really highlights the problem. So these findings push us to rethink, fundamentally, why spread and harm seem so disconnected. What's the core idea here?
The core conceptual novelty, I think, is the suggestion that the mechanisms or traits that make a species good at spreading, things like high dispersal ability, maybe tolerance to different conditions, rapid reproduction,
Right.
those aren't necessarily the same mechanisms or traits that lead to high ecological impact. Impacts often comes from things like being a highly efficient predator, outcompeting natives for specific resources, maybe being toxic, or fundamentally altering habitat. Different skill sets, essentially.
Okay, so the biological traits for spreading might be different from the traits for harming. But paper also mentioned another factor, didn't it? Something about us.
Yes, a huge factor. Humans. The authors argue that invasion success, particularly how fast and far species spread today, isn't primarily driven by the species' own biology anymore,
It's driven
by us moving them around. It's governed by dispersal opportunity, how often we accidentally or intentionally give species a ride.
like in ship ballast water or nursery plants.
Exactly. And propagule pressure.
Propagule pressure. Can you quickly define that?
Sure. It's basically the number of individual organisms released into a new area and how frequently those releases happen.
So not just introducing 10 snails once, but introducing thousands of snails repeatedly.
Right. Even if a species isn't naturally a great colonizer, if humans move huge numbers of them across the globe over and over again, you're essentially giving them countless lottery tickets. Eventually, they're likely to establish and spread just through sheer force of numbers and opportunity.
So human transport is like a massive overlay, obscuring any natural link that might have existed between a species' inherent ability to spread and its potential to cause harm.
That's the argument. Human activities are the dominant driver of spread, and human activities also modify ecosystems, which affects impact. The whole system is heavily influenced by us, making simple biological correlations hard to find.
Which leads directly to their big recommendation, right? For policy, for risk assessment.
Absolutely. Their crucial point is, stop using the term invasive to automatically imply negative impact. If fast-spreading species aren't reliably the most harmful ones, then management strategies and risk assessments can't just use spread potential or rate of spread as the main indicator of danger.
We have to separate the concepts. Spreading potential is one thing, harm potential is another. They aren't the same.
Exactly. You need to assess risk based on evidence of potential harm, not just evidence of potential spread.
Okay. Now, like any good scientific study, this one had limitations. The authors acknowledged things they couldn't fully capture. What were some of those?
Yeah, they were upfront about several things.
hmm
First, context dependence. This is huge in invasion biology.
Meaning a species acts differently in different places.
Totally. A species might be a minor player in one lake, but completely transform another, or thrive in one climate but fail in another. They tried to account for this by using the maximum recorded impact score for each species, wherever it occurred.
But that still averages out local variations, which might be critical for a specific manager on the ground.
Right. The second limitation was their definition of impact. It was quite narrow, focused specifically on those documented severe declines or extirpations of native species populations.
What did that exclude?
It excluded a lot of other potential impacts. Changes to physical habitat structure, like an invasive plant changing fire frequency. Shifts in food web dynamics, even if native species don't disappear entirely. Alterations to ecosystem processes, like nutrient cycling. And importantly, direct economic effects.
Those are all potentially huge impacts, but maybe harder to measure consistently or link directly.
Often, yes, they require different kinds of studies.
And connecting this to the bigger picture, that suggests a really important avenue for future research, doesn't it?
Definitely.
If native species decline isn't correlated with spread rate, maybe some of those other impacts are. Could a fast-spreading species that doesn't kill off natives still cause widespread changes in, say, soil chemistry or water flow across large areas?
That's a great question. Perhaps the type of impact that correlates with spread is different from the type they measured. Widespread, maybe lower intensity impacts on ecosystem function, rather than localized, high-intensity impacts on specific populations. Worth investigating.
And there was a third limitation they mentioned.
Yes, lag times, the time delay problem.
The idea that an introduced species might hang out quietly for years, decades even, before suddenly exploding or causing major problems.
Exactly. It can take a long time for a species to reach peak population density or for its full ecological effects to become clear. They tried to minimize this bias by generally excluding species with invasion histories shorter than a decade.
But you can never be totally sure you've seen the final impact.
No, it's an inherent challenge in the field.
Yeah.
Maximum impact might still be decades away for some species in their data set.
Okay. So wrapping this up, what's the single most important takeaway for someone listening trying to understand biological invasions better?
I think the absolute core message is don't automatically equate colonization success with ecological disaster. The ability of a non-native species to establish and spread rapidly its invasiveness in the ecological sense is not a reliable predictor of how much harm it will cause.
So what does this all mean practically for the people on the ground managing parks, fisheries, forests?
It means management needs a shift in thinking. Prioritizing which species to fight based only on how fast they're spreading is likely inefficient, maybe even counterproductive.
Because you might waste resources on a fast spreader that's basically harmless.
Precisely. Risk assessment needs to focus on quantifying the potential for impact, using data specifically about harm, not just using spread as an easy proxy. Assess the threat, not just the speed.
Okay, so here's a final thought, maybe a bit provocative for you to chew on. If Ricciardi and Cohen are right, and human transport are ships, planes, cars, trade is the main thing, decoupling natural spreadability from impact, then maybe trying to stop all spread is not only impossible but also misdirected. Should managers perhaps focus less on playing whack-a-mole with every new arrival that spreads easily, and more on identifying which specific species pose the biggest harm threat in their particular ecosystem, regardless of how fast they got there?
It certainly pushes towards a more targeted, impact-focused, context-specific approach, focusing on the vulnerability of the place, not just the velocity of the invader.
Something to think about. Understanding the difference between spreading and harming seems absolutely critical.